Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Good morning. We're reading from Canto 11, Chapter 6, and the text is 9. Shudir nimanatsu tateja durashayanam. Vidya shrutadhyayana dana tapa kriya bi. Sattvatmanam rishabhate yashasi pravridha. Shradaya Shravana Sambrityaya Yata. Shudir Nirnamna Tatedya Durashayanam. Vidya Shrutadhyayana Dana Tapa Kriya Bi. Sattvatmanam rishabhate yashasi pravridha. Sakchadaya Shravana Sambritaya Yata. Shudir Nirnamna Tatedya Durashayanam. Vidya Shrutadhyaya Nadana Tapakriya Bihi. Sattvatmanam rishabhate yashasi pravridha. Sakchadraya Shravana Sambritaya Yata. Please chant. Shudir Nirnam Natsu Tadedya Durashayanam. Vidya Shrutadhyaya Nadanata Pakriya Bi. Sattvatmanam rishabhate yashasi pravridha. Sakchadaya Shravana Sambritaya Yata. Shuddhi Nirnam Natsu Tadedya Durashayanam. Vidya Shrutadayana Danata Pakriya Bi. Sattvatmanam rishabhate yashasi pravridha. Sakchadhaya Shravana Sambrityaya Yata. Okay, thank you very much for chanting. So the word for word, Shuddhi, purification. Nirnam, of persons. Na is not. Tu, but. Tata, in such a way. Idya, O worshipable one. Durashayanam, of those whose consciousness is contaminated. Vidya, by ordinary worship. Shruta, hearing and obeying the injunctions of the Vedas. Adhyayana, study of various shastras. Dana, charity. Tapa, austere penances. Kriyabi, and ritual activities. Sattva Atmanam, of those who are situated in pure goodness. Rishabha, O greatest of all. Te, your. Yashasi, in the glories. Pravridha, fully matured. Sat, transcendental. Shraddhaya, by faith. Shravana Sambritaya, which is reinforced by the process of hearing. Yata, as. Syat, there is. And the translations by the disciple of Srila Prabhupada. O greatest of all, those whose consciousness is polluted by illusion cannot purify themselves merely by ordinary worship, study of the Vedas, charity, austerity, and ritual activities. O Lord, our Lord, those pure souls who have developed a powerful transcendental faith in your glories achieve a purified state of existence that can never be attained by those lacking such faith. Oh, actually, I've got a purport too, sorry. Even if a pure devotee is lacking the above qualifications, such as Vedic study and austerity, if he has unflinching faith in Lord Krishna, the Lord will save him because of his devotion. On the other hand, if one becomes falsely proud of one's material qualifications, including ordinary piety, but does not devote himself to hearing and chanting the glories of Krishna, the result will ultimately be nil. The transcendental spirit soul cannot be purified by any amount of material piety, charity, or scholarship. Only the transcendental Supreme Lord can purify the transcendental living entity by bestowing his mercy within the heart. The demigods were astonished at their good fortune. Even by hearing about Krishna, one achieves all perfection. But they had entered the Lord's own city and were seeing him standing before them. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurimilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupakadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Yuta Padakamlam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Jagrajatan Sahagan Alita Shri. Sorry. Vandeham Shri Guru Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatan Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Sarijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitam Shah. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapsa Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavan Ishvari Vrishabhanu Suti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpataribhya Shakripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavinebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Romapada Swami Iti Namine Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'll read the translation once again. O greatest of all, those whose consciousness is polluted by illusion cannot purify themselves merely by ordinary worship, study of the Vedas, charity, austerity, and ritual activities. I think that should be, O Lord. Those pure souls who have developed a powerful transcendental faith in your glories achieve a purified state of existence that can never be attained by those lacking such faith. So these words were spoken by the demigods. And in fact, there's a listing of those personalities. It's quite a long list, so it wasn't just one category of demigods. There were the Maruts, the Adityas, the Vasus, the Ashvinis, the Ripus, the Angiras, the Rudras, Vishvedevas, Siddhas, Gandharvas, Apsaras, Nagas, Siddhas, Charanas, Guyakas, the great sages and forefathers, and the Vidyaharas and Kinnaras. So many different sections of the upper planetary systems. And this is given in text 6. So there's Srila Sukadeva Goswami describing what transpired when this huge entourage had come to see Lord Krishna. So here's the description. The devotees covered the Supreme Lord of the universe with flower garlands brought from the gardens of heaven. Then they praised him, the best of the Yadu dynasty, with statements containing charming words and ideas. So the verbalization is as important as the bedecking of Lord Krishna with the garlands, because it's giving something of the mindset of the personalities that have come to visit. So hence the mention on the words and the ideas that were expressed. So that was Sukadeva Goswami describing of what transpired at that moment. So some of these meaningful words and attractive verses is today's verse. So Srila Vishwanath puts across those words that were spoken, and this is what we're looking at today. So this is him paraphrasing. Just as everyone should worship your lotus feet, they should also hear and remember your glories. So, those were Srila Vishwanath paraphrasing the main idea of what was being expressed, some of these wonderful ideas and words that were coming out of this huge entourage of heavenly denizens. So, of course, to hold some opinion, one has to offer reasons. If one doesn't offer reasons for one's beliefs, one may be considered dogmatic, opinionated, or even somewhat close-minded, you could say. So this is necessary if we wish to persuade others that the opinions we express are worth having. So in addition, beliefs we hold require reasons. Otherwise, there's a sense of insecurity about the beliefs. So if somebody makes a dramatic statement, but it's not followed by some reasoning, you'll notice even the person is a little unsure of themselves because they're not reinforcing their belief. Reasoning does that. So this obligation that's been expressed here by these heavenly denizens to worship the Lord's lotus feet is propelled by a very important reason to do so. So the reason, which is factual, is given by the personified Vedas. So this is the personified Vedas speaking. It's in an earlier canto, the 10th canto, the 87th chapter, where they say this, and this is an explanation or giving a factual reason for why one needs to worship the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Only if they become your faithful followers are those who breathe actually alive. Otherwise, their breathing is like that of a bellows. So a very dramatic reason. So I'm drawing from personified Vedas, giving a reason for why the lotus feet of Lord Krishna needs to be worshipped. But as we go through it, you'll see many other reasons. To be actually alive is to live one's life with purpose. That's what it actually means. Your life has to be lived with purpose. One has to be conscious of one's well-wishing benefactor, meaning the Supreme Lord. In fact, in a human body, spiritual suicide is committed if one turns away from the Lord. It's very extreme what is actually, why this necessity to worship the Supreme Lord. And Sri Upanishad in Mantra 3, Acharya Nama Te Loka, Andena Tamas Vrita, Tams Te Pretya Bigachanti, Yete Chatma Hanto Jana. The killer of the soul, whoever he may be, must enter into the planets known as the world of the faithless, full of darkness and ignorance. So there's that statement of what the outcome is, should one actually choose that position in the human body of turning one's attention away from the personality that is actually one's benefactor. So one has to be cognizant of the responsibilities of a human life. And one has to work in that spirit, that one is cognizant of one's responsibilities. So those suras or godly persons, who are cognizant of their responsibilities in a human life and are working in that spirit, they, in fact, aim at the lotus feet of the Lord, and they act accordingly. So acting in accord with the aim of worshipping the lotus feet of the Lord, the suras, or godly persons, they hear and remember the glories of the Lord. So that's part of having that aim, where space is made for a particular activity that's bringing into the consciousness the Lord being one's benefactor. One's hearing about his glories, one's remembering his glories. So that glory of the Lord is spoken about also by the personified Vedas, and this is how they put it. It is by your mercy alone that the elements, beginning with the Mahatattva and false ego, created the egg of this universe. Among the manifestations known as Annamaya and so forth, you are the ultimate one, entering within the material coverings along with the living entity and assuming the same forms as those he takes. Distinct from the gross and subtle material manifestations, you are the reality underlying them all. So very extraordinary. Underlying this whole visible reality of human life and the very material cosmos that's been created by the Lord is he himself, present everywhere. So he is that reality that's underlying everything. So in the beginning of creation, just to expand on this, Lord Mahavishnu glanced at the dormant material nature, the Prakrit, and so he awakened the subtle Prakrit and began to evolve into more concrete forms. First the Mahat, then the false ego, in conjunction with each of the material nature's three modes, and gradually the various material elements, including, and these are classed as material elements, intelligence, mind, the senses, and the 5 physical elements, the earth, water, fire, air, and ether. That's the composition of the body, with their presiding demigods. So all the arrangements are put in place, including the personalities that are actually going to preside over these elements. Even after becoming separately manifested, the deities responsible for the various elements could not work together to produce the perceptible world until Lord Vishnu, by his special mercy, intervened. So this is mentioned, my Maitreya to Vidura, and is related, of course, by Sukadev Goswami. This is how it's put. The controlling deities of all the above-mentioned physical elements are empowered expansions of Lord Vishnu. They are embodied by eternal time under the external energy, and they are his parts and parcels. Because they are entrusted with different functions of universal duties and were unable to perform them, they offered fascinating prayers to the Lord as follows. So here's one of the prayers. So we're getting a picture of these demigods that were placed in the position of controlling all the elements. It's all under Lord Vishnu's control, and they're his expansions, but they're discovering that they can't actually do their work. So this is some of the prayers they offer, and it gives you so much insight into this whole concept of how one actually puts one's aim on the lotus feet of the Lord. So here's an example. Because it shows their adherence to recognizing their duty towards the Supreme Lord, because that's the whole point in this verse. So they say, "O Lord, your lotus feet are like an umbrella for the surrendered souls, protecting them from all the miseries of material existence. All the sages under that shelter throw off all material miseries. We therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto your lotus feet." We get a chance to hear and remember. That was their particular statement. So they're recognizing there's a category of persons. So the sages were one of the categories that arrived to see Lord Krishna in Dwarka in this verse. And here it is, the demigods themselves in a different section, they actually are recognizing that the sages, just by virtue of their fixing their focus on the lotus feet of Krishna, they've been able to throw aside all kinds of material miseries. So they're saying, therefore, they too offer their respectful obeisances unto the Lord's lotus feet. So we get a chance to hear and remember the Lord's glories through the prayers of the demigods, continuing their acknowledgement of the obligation to the Lord, because was the starting point. There's an obligation to live one's life with purpose. There's an obligation to recognize one's benefactor. So they give reasons that are credible to us who are listeners. So they say, because that's the point, if you've got a belief, you have to reinforce it. So they've said that they've seen others lose all material miseries because they've taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, the sages. And now they're giving reasons that are very credible. So this is what the demigods say. "O Father, O Lord, O personality of Godhead, the living entities in the material world can never have any happiness because they are overwhelmed by the 3 kinds of miseries. Therefore, they take shelter of the shade of your lotus feet, which are full of knowledge, and we also thus take shelter of them." So just pausing for a minute, if one's been practicing bhakti yoga, devotional service to the Supreme Lord, one becomes triply conscious of the material miseries. So, the problems with one's own mind, the problems caused by other people being unkind, cruel, yes, just very unkind. And of course, whatever sufferings there from the external environment requiring that one looks for some protection, like in the moment, warmth. So the idea is to take shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. So that's, of course, the demigods talking in the 3rd canto and the 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the knowledge, because they're referring to the lotus feet as being full of knowledge. So the knowledge, this taking shelter of the shade of the lotus feet of the Lord, is in the devotional service to the Lord. And here the reason is given, which gives an explanation of why it is that taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord in devotional service is, providing knowledge. The Lord personally takes charge of dissipating the darkness of ignorance from the heart of a devotee. And this is how he puts it, Bhagavad Gita 10:10. Tesham satata yuktanam, bhajanam priti purvakam, dadami buddhi yogam tam, yena mam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. So that's what's actually happening. Understanding is arising in the heart because that darkness, all that misery that's coming from mind, unkindness of others, difficulties created by the environment, Lord Krishna is moving that darkness out. And he's providing understanding because one is able to understand everything in its proper perspective. One isn't at the mercy of one's mind. One isn't at the mercy of the external discomfort. One isn't at the mercy of the cruelty of others. So this category of persons that are engaged fully in the transcendental service of the Lord have their minds constantly on the lotus feet of the Lord, and they talk solely on transcendental subject matter. They engage in glorifying the pastimes and the qualities of the Lord. And in our society, we have examples of such personalities who are literally constantly engaged in transcendental subject matter. I mean, I often find myself marveling quite frequently because the spiritual master I have, even at a very advanced age, every 3 days he's traveling to a new place. And without fail, there is some broadcast class. And it's usually twice a day one has seen it. So constantly engaged in talking on transcendental subject matter, engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord. So, of course, that's, very advanced personalities that have that exclusive, all their time taken up in that kind of focus. But it doesn't mean that if one is not in that advanced state, that one also isn't engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord. So knowledge comes not from philosophical speculation. And I remember when I was at university, I used to like reading philosophical books. So I'd look at different philosophers and I'd appreciate nihilistic philosophy, and it seemed very much in tune with Western ideas. But, now I understand it's actually philosophical, speculative ideas, because it's somebody's own experience and then expanding it into a broader kind of speculative framework. So the idea is that knowledge isn't coming from that source, but it's actually coming from devoting oneself to the Lord. That's actually where knowledge is coming from. Because Lord Krishna is removing that ignorance that's in the heart. So Srila Vishwanath continues in his commentary on this verse of today, and these are his words. O worshipable Lord, purification does not take place by knowledge and other processes, because their hearts are generally contaminated by pride in those processes. So there's the problem in all those philosophical books that I'd gone through in my formative years. There's a problem that there's pride that's laced in all that speculative knowledge. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, O best among the avatars, with Sudasattva bodies, purification will take place by abundant superior faith in hearing, remembering, and glorifying your fame, which is nourished by hearing scripture. So very practical how it is that knowledge is obtained. One needs to hear, one needs to remember, one needs to glorify the Lord. One needs to give oneself nourishment by hearing scriptures. So there's a statement made in Antya-lila which gives a factual reason that supports purification. And this is that statement. And it's a listing where there's different devotees that are glorified in different ways according to their interactions with Lord Chaitanya. So this is that statement that gives a factual reason that supports purification. The pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are very deep. Who can understand them? Only one who has firm, deep devotion to his lotus feet. So it's, I just thought it was a beautiful statement because it's very much tying up this concept of fixing one's mind in devotion to the lotus feet of the Lord. And it's tying up with the fact that the nourishment that one gives oneself is hearing scriptures and being able to understand even what one is hearing requires that deep devotion to the lotus feet of the Lord. So the role of faith also is exemplified by a comparison that's made between a brahmana and a devotee dog eater, originally being a dog eater. So here's that comparison. So the role of faith is exemplified here. And this is coming from the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the 9th chapter. If a brahmana has all 12 of the brahminical qualifications as they are stated in the book called Sanat Sujata, but is not a devotee and is averse to the lotus feet of the Lord, he is certainly lower than a devotee who is a dog eater, or at least prior to becoming a devotee, but who has dedicated everything, mind, words, activities, wealth, and life to the Supreme Lord. Such a devotee is better than such a brahmana, because the devotee can purify his whole family, whereas the so-called brahmana, in a position of false prestige, so again that problem of pride, cannot purify even himself. So that's the extraordinary comparison that's made between a brahmana and a devotee who comes from a dog-eating background. So the faith component is so important that it even puts that person from that kind of background in a higher position than somebody who's taken birth as a Brahmana and supposedly has all the Brahminical qualities. So this comparison that I've just read is made by Prahlad Maharaj, 7th canto. So there's a reason that's given that bears on an opinion that's given. So you can have a different kind of reason. It has some reference to the opinion you're expressing. So the devotee ranks higher than the ritualistic karma kanda brahmana. So this makes the reason most relevant. Sorry. Because it bears on the given opinion of Prahlad Maharaj. And he puts it this way: one who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So it's not that perfection is attained just by understanding the difference between the jiva and material nature, but that the person has taken shelter of Krishna alone. That's the important point. Although he appears in many forms, such a Krishna is not touched by the modes of nature. And he puts it this way: I'm the controller of Maya. I am composed of pure knowledge and bliss, and I am the abode of precious qualities such as omniscience. He who takes shelter of me alone by performing the process of bhakti yoga surpasses the gunas, which are hard to surpass, and attains his own inherent nature, Brahma Bhuyaya. So that's Lord Krishna talking. So what are those what is that particular inherent nature that results from taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord? It's extraordinary. One is then in a state of committing no sin. There's no old age. There's no hunger. There's no thirst. There's no lamentation. One is fully truthful. And all one's desires are automatically satisfied. So that is the outcome of taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. So these were some thoughts on this particular text that we looked at today. If there's some thought that expands the discussion, please feel free.
What's your thinking on the initial statement that you started the class with in terms of backing one's ideas and one's expressions with reason? And without reason, then it can fall into a very narrow sort of mindset. And in relationship to the verse, as you develop the class, is in terms of the demigods, the reason of the demigods that they're actually establishing for worshiping the lotus feet of the Lord. And the verse expresses that without all these activities that are very essential, studies of the Vedas, rituals, all these different activities cannot purify one properly or fully. One requires to worship the lotus feet of the Lord. It's a requirement, otherwise the purification won't fully happen. So they're establishing a reason for that. And I was just thinking about, okay, so there is reason, but then reason have to be translated into action, and in one sense, one have to represent the ideas that one have, which are strengthened by reason. So the acting part, therefore, this principle in our Vaishnava teachings that one have to act accordingly. There's a prachar and there's the achar. The achar is the behavior of the devotees, how we act. And the prachar is the ideas that we have, the ideals that we have. So those things have to match, and if they don't match, then there is a problem. So although there may be reason, there's a gap there. There's something that is not happening. So to bridge or to have that connection between our ideals and our capacity to act in our ideals is something that is not a simple thing. And then we see it also. Yesterday, I think Hari Bhakti Prabhu was talking about sometimes demigods becoming victimized also by some material, situation, even great personalities, So, what to speak of ourselves? So, what is it? What is what is that disconnect between ideals and actions? What would you say on that?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Well, the demigods, as you pointed out from yesterday's class, there are examples of coming under the sway of material energy, and it's mentioned that there is that aspect that the demigods have to deal with too. So I think through their prayers, one is understanding that the articulation of the role the Supreme Lord plays in helping one to go past the influence of material energy, whatever one's own personal learned patterns are in the mind, and hence the intelligence operating according to those patterns, requires that I think conscious articulation of what one's problem is, recognizing how one's mind actually works in a particular sequence that's a learned sequence. It's a result of this lifetime, perhaps previous lifetimes. And if one is able to articulate how that one's mind is programmed, that learned pattern, comes to recognize it through practicing devotional life, one can more easily articulate to the Lord the necessity that one feels to have his shelter, to be able to try and go past that learned pattern that Srila Prabhupada always refers to as, one's conditioned nature. So the articulation to the Supreme Lord, imploring assistance to go past that pattern in the mind and the consequent way in which the intelligence would be inclined to act is, I think that, what would you say? I don't know if it's correct to say the cement that can bring closer the ideals and the reality of behavior and way of even processing internally something. So it requires being very conscious and cognizant of one's own functioning that makes the appeal to the Lord for protection and appeal to find a way past that, to move closer to Him, is then going to permit that movement closer to the ideal. So that's the best way I can explain it. Yeah, so being very conscious and being able to articulate it to the Supreme Lord, and with the very genuine desire for assistance, because it's not that one is going to be crossing over that conditioned state, those learned patterns with such ease. Because one's having to change a lot of behavior, one's having to change even a style of thinking. So, yeah, the ideal becomes more, or moving towards the ideal becomes more real with that work that one is doing internally, strengthened by genuine appeal and articulation to the Supreme Lord for assistance.
Yeah, that's very good. The establishing of the necessity to take shelter on the lotus feet of the Lord is the principle.
Yes.
And it's a principle that addresses that predicament that conditioned souls are in this material world, that in fact we are conditioned by material nature, and without the shelter of the Lord, there's no chance of overcoming that material condition.
Yes. I mean, you know, I studied psychology for quite a few years. That was part of my university training, and I was very much drawn to behaviorism. So it's a very classic example of how strong conditioning is. There's a Russian psychologist, Pavlov, who had dogs, and he would ring a bell, and the dogs understood that when the bell rang, food was going to come. So what he noticed, that the pattern got established in the mind. The bell would ring, immediately salivation would happen. There's understanding. Oh, bell is associated, the sound of the bell is associated with food coming. So that dog, no doubt, those dogs that learned that pattern now for the rest of their lives, every time they hear a bell ring, it may or may not, food may or may not arrive after that. I mean, that was a laboratory experiment, but that's very strong learning. So patterns that are there in the mind and the intelligence then operating according to that pattern, it's extremely strong. One is really at the mercy of that. So it's it can't be overcome without a great deal of prayer for strength and prayer for understanding how to go past learned behavior, prayer to go past learned thinking, images that one's carrying from this life, previous lives that are there that one actually has to, you know, go past. They're kind of dictating certain behavior or certain way of thinking. one cannot go past those learned patterns unless one is truly taking shelter of the Supreme Lord and praying fervently for the mercy of one's spiritual master, the mercy of those personalities that are constantly engaged in devoting their lives to the service of the Lord and are truly at the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, and oneself taking that responsibility to pray to that kind of personality and also pray to the Supreme Lord that these patterns can be broken.
I have one more comment unless someone else wants to. I thought that just in light of this discussion, the purport highlighted that the element of pride becomes almost like the destroyer of the capacity that we have to take shelter on the lotus feet of the Lord. And the purport talks about that if one becomes proudful, how you say proud? Yeah, proud of one's position, of one's qualifications, then finish. Then that becomes, the big obstacle on taking shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. So the position of humility and devotion is highlighted too in order to be able to take shelter on the lotus feet. I thought it was very important.
Yeah, I was reflecting on this topic of pride, and one of the things that came to my mind was that it's a strange thing because here the mention of pride was in relation to, even if one's actually in touch with Vedic scriptures or one is a charitable person, still those things won't purify the heart. It won't take away whatever ignorant patterns are there. But I was thinking also, pride is so damaging that without knowing it, one is actually harming others. So it's really some trait that when it rears its head, it actually compounds the difficulty and staying in that conditioned learned space. So one can understand that it's even being charitable, etc., may not actually be able to clean that. It really requires that devotion to the Supreme Lord. Because it's not only that the person is acknowledging their material qualifications, but it's that unknowingly they're actually causing so much distress to other living entities. Because pride does that. It makes one oblivious to the presence of others and the needs of others. So interactions bring about so much distress where the interaction involves a prideful element on the part of someone. And it can be not just, on a small scale, it can even be like rulers of countries that, are operating with pride. It's actually causing so much distress to millions of people because it's oblivious to the needs of others. So, yeah, it's a thought that comes. So thank you for bringing up that point of pride, and that it's only the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord that allows one to move past that. Even normally, like pious activities, don't permit one to go past it, because one can still be proud of being charitable, or one can be proud of, reading the Vedas, or even speculating on the Vedas, or coming up with new theories. Yeah. So if there isn't anything else, thank you very much for your very kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.